Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Zen Spirit. I'm your host, Paul James Caiden, and this week we have a very special guest that I'm going to introduce in just a few moments. And we're going to be talking about seeing the world, seeing reality the way that it is, not the way we want it to be. And I think this is a very important and timely topic. I was talking to a friend online a couple weeks ago before Christmas who is a Buddhist. And I asked her, I said, what do you think Buddha would say if he were alive today and saw the state of the world? And she said, I think he would say we lack balance and clear thinking. And boy, she was right. A lot of people these days, we edit out the facts. We see reality the way we want it to be rather than the way it is. And, I generally like to start out the show with a quote from Buddha or from the Bible or, one of the other holy books or scriptures. And today I wanted to read just from the Noble Eightfold Path of Buddhism. And I was going to start first and foremost by saying, laying the platform for this show with right thinking or right thought. But the first 4 points of the Noble Eightfold Path really stood out for me as far as the direction the world's going in these days. And those first 4 principles are right understanding, right thought, right speech, and right action. And how much do we lack those things in our world today? I would say very much so in a lot of instances. And so now to bring our guest on board to talk about this topic, seeing the world the way it is, seeing reality for what it is. Welcome to the show, my old podcasting buddy, Stan Wanglund. Welcome to the show, Stan.
Well, thanks, Paul. Thanks for having me on the show. It's very nice to be back doing a podcast. I haven't done many podcasts in the past year or so. After having a very successful show called Just Thinking, we talk about this and all kinds of other things. And kind of one of the reasons, I stopped doing the show is just due to the situation we're talking about tonight. Our world has become so unclear in its thinking. It doesn't seem to have even a semblance of shared reality at times, and it's a pretty big issue. I agree with you. I was thinking one of the things I would talk about is just what you touched on: right thinking, right behaviors, the 4 Noble Truths, the Eightfold Paths. There's a million things that emphasize what you'd like to talk about and I'd like to talk about tonight. So it's great to be here.
Yeah, it's good
to be here, and hopefully somebody in your audience will, hopefully get a bit of information that can be useful in, to try and improve, their thinking.
Well, that's why we do this crazy thing, whether we have 5 or 5,000 listeners, is just to get a little bit of a nugget of positivity out there. And before we launch into our topic, just tell the folks out there, your credentials, a little about yourself. We had a show together, about 2 years ago called People Under the Stairs. You were a guest on my show, The Spirit Side, quite a few times, as long as it ran.
Sure.
And so tell the folks out there, who is Stan Wanglund and why is he qualified to talk about this topic with us today?
Well, I'm going on 72 years of age right now, and just recently, within the past year and a half, I finally stopped working as a psychologist and a psychology professor and so on and so forth. But I was in I'm trained classically as a clinical psychologist, and I worked for the state of New York and other states, for over 40 plus years. My longest running job was with the state of New York for 37 years, and I was administrator of all kinds of programs, covering about 1/5 of the state of New York for people who were developmentally disabled. I, worked in mental hygiene and done private practice with people in terms of counseling and things like that. And was also an adjunct professor at SUNY Broome here at Broome Community College, where I taught 3 different sections of human development, psychology, human exceptionality, things like that. And in my career, I've also been a management consultant and done a lot of personal consulting with people on performance enhancement and things like, of that nature. And all of those things require you to be really a pretty darn good critical thinker, especially when I would do management training and team building and things like that. And the things that you would really center upon in those exercises, or when you're working with somebody as, kind of a psychotherapist or a coach or a counselor or things like that, is being able to see the world accurately. And not just to, endlessly make up reasons why you do what you do, but rather have some pretty solid techniques on, looking at what you're doing as opposed to why you're doing it, if that makes any sense to you.
Mm-hmm.
Because everybody can look at a situation, and if they want to erroneously or correctly see it, in a million different ways. So, that's kind of my background, and I'm also a very spiritual person. I'm a podcaster and things like that. And, as I reach the latter part of my life, I'll often say to people, here we are in 2022, and the world is always going to be as it is, but this isn't the world I envisioned when I was a young man.
Yeah, not at all.
No, not being, I was born in 1950, and certainly lived in a golden age in America, and, was in the military, drafted in the military during the Vietnam War, and have seen all kinds of changes and things like that. But I think we're in a really distinctly very unusual period in history. And, that comes and goes, it seems. I'm a kind of a history fanatic. This certainly isn't the first time. But it's a very, very strange period in history where people are acting like they're swinging after the bell. And I like the approach that, you said you wanted to take about, constantly, putting out good things for people as opposed to divisive, critical things for people. And I don't mean to present this in a critical way, but just in an observational way. This is my, this is my perception, my understanding of what I see going on right now. And, it ties into how I've spent my entire life, helping people see reality, to make better decisions, including myself. And it seems that right now, it's really, really a very, very, very severe problem in our world. So does that answer your question as to who I am and what I do and why I'm here doing the show with you?
I think it does. I think it gives the folks listening a good idea that you're just not some Joe, that I pulled out of the closet. But yeah, these are topics, I think we have to talk about. And, like you said, you got tired of doing it on your show because, we were just getting in that period where everybody was angry, and all we seemed to do was, complain and spout off on our shows there for a while. And I don't think that's the approach, and that's why I changed up my show, and, I want to try to do things a bit differently. And, when we're talking about the Eightfold Path, right understanding, right thought, right speech, right action, the thing I'm seeing, if we're going to look at this from, that, just the Buddhist perspective at the moment, what we're seeing is a lot of ego. People, they're saying, well, I'm woke. And, a lot of these folks, they actually believe that God specially chose them or woke them to see these evils of the world. And I'm going to be doing a show down the pike called woke versus enlightenment, and compare them side by side and see if there's any comparison to these things at all, or whether this is kind of a fringe movement of our day that's kind of taking us down the wrong road. But it's a lot of ego, and not just in the woke community, but everybody has this idea. If I think it, if I believe it, if I do the research, even if my research is very biased and one-sided, then it is the truth, and they become very angry, very defensive if you disagree or say, well, no, that is not reality, and that's a lot of ego saying, no, I'm right. What I say is right. What I believe right, that is reality. But folks, that's just not so. And I think Buddha or Jesus or any of the great teachers and sages of old would look at us and say, wow, folks, you're really, plummeting down that path of, egotism or, pride, just with blinders on. You're not even seeing, what you're doing. And I think that's something we really need to wake up to and do a personal moral inventory of our attitude, and why we're thinking these things. And
well, see, I see as a spinoff from this. It's many times people will look at me like I have, when I will tell them that I'm a spiritual person, or that I'm a Christian, number one, as well as being a spiritual person, but they'll say, Stan, you're really and forgive me, folks, if I sound egotistical here or something, but my career is based on being not only a very good administrator of programs, but also just really of working with and becoming an excellent clinician, which I prided myself on, because you can't help anybody unless you understand the clinical and scientific process for things. So I'm a highly trained scientist. Psychology is a science. It's not, it's not just, you just don't pull things out of your head when people have serious psychological issues, or you're testing people for whatever. My point is to piggyback on you, Paul, with the, Eightfold Paths, or, the Four Noble Truths, or the certain tenets of Christianity or other religions or whatever. People think that you cannot equate, or that science and religion and philosophy, that all these things work in a vacuum from one another. And my experience has been just the opposite. They don't. One of the things I teach developmental psychology, and one of the things you learn when you study Kohlberg, for example, is the moral development of human beings. Well, religion and Buddhism and philosophy and Aristotle and Socrates, besides teaching you how to think, they also get into very important areas of morality and your values, and your sense of morality, your sense of values. Your thinking influences your actions, and your actions influence your thought. If you folks are following what I'm trying to say, when that breaks down, or people are not working on those things at all, we run into big problems. I saw research thing the other day, that a piece of research that said once people graduate high school, I think it was 72% of people who leave high school never read another book again. From cover to cover. Now, I'm not saying they don't pick up and read some of the book, and then it goes on. And the percentages vary. Like when they meet people in college, I think the number was 42% of people won't read a book from cover to cover ever again. And that's shocking.
Yeah.
You think of how many people that you know, probably yourself, I know I certainly have been guilty of this, have literally lived huge portions of my life flying by the seat of my pants. And if you're in the audience listening to this, do an honest inventory. Are you flying many times by the seat of your pants just in terms of your thinking and your decision making? But then, are you really studying and paying attention to your moral development, your clarifying your values, so on and so forth, and doing that in a clear thinking fashion. Does that make sense to you, Paul?
Oh, absolutely, it does.
If you're not doing those things, what kind of outcomes do you expect? And that's another issue that it seems to really be a problem in today's world, and it's been a problem in the past too, is that people look for outcomes, but they don't understand that outcomes are pretty much irrelevant. It's the process that's important. That if you have a good process for things, you'll get the best outcomes you can possibly get. It's as simple as that. It's actually called process theory. When we sit there and I would do management training, I would tell people that. I say everything should be process. Think of it if you're trying to exercise or lose weight or whatever it is. If all you're interested in is outcomes, you'll starve yourself. And you'll lose some pounds and then you'll gain it right back. However, if you engage in a very sensible and moral and ethical and intelligent and clear and understandable, a dietary and exercise program, you'll probably not only lose some weight, but you'll be able to keep it off as long as you implement the process. And it's the same way with making decisions or seeing the world, clearly, or having a good set of moral, beliefs. When I say a good set of, a productive set of beliefs, and beliefs that are grounded in solid thinking and, good observation and clear thinking, accuracy, things like that, as to how, the things that human beings require to do well. So it's think to yourself. As you're listening to the show, is that what you see when you click on the news? Is that what you're seeing with your children or your partners or your family or the people in your community? Or are you seeing some hodgepodge of that? I see many times very good people just not knowing the process.
No, they certainly don't. Like I said, everybody seems to be flying by the seat of their pants, grabbing bits of information here, there, and everywhere, and a lot of it too. And you can chime in on this. A lot of people are taking those bits and pieces of information, whether it's from the news or largely through the internet, whether they're listening to some self-proclaimed preacher or guru or seer or prophet. These people are all over the internet. They're taking those bits of information that seem to be very riddled with fear, and it's making them afraid. It's making them very distrustful of others, of their community, of society, of their leaders, and that's just causing more confusion, more violence, more division. So, what is your take on that?
Oh, I think that's one of the apparent things. Mark Twain, who wrote, Huckleberry Finn, a great humorist and a great observationalist. He said, "It ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you do know for sure that just ain't so." Think about that one. It ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so. And that's about confirmation bias. And that's about what we all do. Don't you find out that you hang around with a lot of people and they become your best friend for life, your big BFF? Because they pretty much think like you do all the time. And, they stick up for the things that you want. So when you get on, if you have a tendency to be conservative or you want the country a certain way and you want to go back to the way that it was, let's use a political thing. Everybody's into that. So you get on Fox News and you got people throwing out all kinds of stuff to you. And you'll latch onto that because it confirms what you want to believe, right? Mm-hmm. That makes people feel less nervous. That isn't being a good thinker or a critical thinker, but it's what human beings do. Now, let's be fair. Watch MSNBC. I'm not a Fox News person, obviously. I can't stomach NBC. It's slanted news. It's slightly more accurate to me than Fox News, but sometimes it's just as slanted and just as wrong in a different direction. So it's not what I don't know that gets me into trouble. It's what I know for sure that I'm seeing from Sean Hannity or Stephanie Rule or somebody else on the show. You know what I'm trying to say?
Mm-hmm.
It just ain't so some of the time. And I'm not saying all the news is fake or anything else like that on any of that, but they're slanted. They're biased. And we get that from all kinds of stuff. There's all kinds of funny statements that people have about this, about thinking that, don't condemn the judgment of another because it differs from your own. You may both be wrong. That's from an ancient Greek philosopher. You're sitting and fighting with somebody, and neither one of us or neither one of you is a critical thinker. Nobody, has gone through the process of doing what they need to go through to think clearly or accurately. And you're fighting, on death's door, and both people are wrong. And what we have now is a media just like this, with the show that Paul and I are doing, with Paul's show, with me as a guest. You're bombarded by podcasts, by Twitter, by Facebook, by all kinds of information that is embedded. We're not sure of it in terms of, is it understandable? Is it free from errors or distortions? Is it exact in terms of detail? Does it even relate to the matters at hand? Does it have multiple viewpoints on things? Is it focusing on important things or trivial things? Get what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, absolutely.
It doesn't meet any of those standards. And there are, I believe, when I teach critical thinking, for example, on how to think and to analyze in the best way, which is based on scientific and philosophical, and educational standards, I think there's 11 of them. And the first one is clarity. Is when you're looking at things and you're trying to think about a problem or observe a situation, is it understandable? Can you even grasp the meaning? Can you elaborate on things? Can you give actual examples? Can you illustrate what you mean by it? And is it accurate? Is it free from errors and distortions? Things like that. Now, do you think, if you're listening to the show, do you think that when you and I are making decisions, we even meet those two standards? And by my count, let me just say this, I think there's 11. There's 11 scientific or intellectual standards if you want to be considered a really clear thinker. You can't even meet 3 of them 90% of the time. Oh.
Yeah. And I think... I was going to say, I think one of the big challenges, too, is, how, we can talk about, make sure you're hearing right, make sure you're getting the right information, or at least the best information you can, but how do we reach those people that do go on Facebook or YouTube and, that they cobble together these things, these political views or, very, bizarre religious views that are, not even scientifically proven. The COVID vaccine is the mark of the beast, or it's going to change our DNA. And, they really, really believe this with all their heart. How do we get them to understand that, hey, some of these things you're hearing, that are tying you in knots of fear and suspicion, it's just not so. A lot of people, it's extremely difficult, if not impossible, to get them to sit down and really reevaluate that information. They just won't do it. So as a psychologist...
I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, as a psychologist, how would you think, or suggest, we could get through to folks to have them, at least think about, the other side of the argument?
Right. Well, I'll tell you the truth. I don't know if it's the other side of the argument they're going to get, but the first is using the same rules that I went over for, how do you become a clear thinker, to try and understand what that other person is actually messaging to you. So that when they are giving you information, we don't listen to somebody. We try and convince them, number one. I taught as a college professor for 22 years, but for almost 35 years, I taught as an adjunct instructor in staff development for my organization, which means that I could go 4 or 5 times a year, and my students were people who were PhD psychologists, doctors, nurses, nurse administrators, treatment team leaders, business officers with MBAs. You know what I'm trying to say? Mm-hmm. Nobody likes to get up. I'm a peer and a colleague of people, and I'm getting up and doing, as an adjunct instructor for staff development, for their personal, professional growth and development. What am I trying to say? They don't want to listen to anybody. They don't want to listen to anybody. But the one advantage that I had over them as an instructor is I had clarity and understanding of what my job was as an instructor. I was not just to instruct them there in whatever the particular thing was about management or some procedural thing in our agency. I had to understand that I had to use the principles of adult learning. And there's only one major principle for adult learning that you have to follow, Paul. And you're going to find it in religion, you're going to find it in morality, you're going to find it in the politics, you're going to find it in your personal life. What's in it for me? Does that make sense to you? What's in it for me? Once when you're looking at a doctor and you're trying to say, how the hell am I going to make this guy want to understand this piece of information? Doctors are notoriously cheap. Doctors don't like to be sued. Doctors don't like to be questioned. Doctors like things to be short when it comes to paperwork or whatever. You can go through a whole list. You need clarity and understanding of what it is that the doctor wants. And then you have to ask the doctors, honestly, and get accurate information that's free from errors or my distortions or what, if I don't like doctors or what. We have to check on that. We have to check on it with multiple doctors. We have to get exact information as much as we can and get all the details. And then we have to look at the complexities of it. We see, are there different points of view that doctors have? Are there multiple viewpoints? It sounds like it's a lot of work, but it's not. Think of all the political stuff that we see. You look at people engage in behaviors on one side or the other that's against their best interests. Right? Mm-hmm. And you'd say, what's in it for them? We're thinking that, we're making an assumption that if this person's a very conservative person, well, why don't you want to do that? You're going to get more money. It's going to be better for your kids. Blah, blah, blah. But that person, since we haven't been clear and we haven't asked them really seriously and sat down and wanted to hear what they had to say from their point of view, we don't know what's in it for them to stay in this one direction. That they're doing this doesn't appear to be in their best interest. Or if we're taking a liberal person and you say, why would you want to pay more taxes? Or why would you want to do that? It's not in your best interest. You're not getting more money. Why? What I'm trying to say is we are not clear in what we're seeing, and we're not clear in what we're hearing. We haven't investigated enough. We don't have accurate stuff. We're not precise enough. We're not using good thinking. So we don't really know what we're talking about with that person. And we have people who give up money or give up benefits because what is for them is they want emotional satisfaction. They're not looking for money kinds of satisfaction. Am I making sense with this point?
Yes, you are.
It's why a person will not wear a mask. You're not going to tell me. I just use that. I'm a child. I was born in 1950. Let me tell you, I can remember my parents being frightened to death that I would get polio. We're talking about COVID, man. Kids would wind up in an iron lung. when that vaccine came out, man, there was nobody saying, I don't want to get vaccinated. But who was the president then? Dwight Eisenhower. It was the 50s, right after World War II. It was the golden age of everybody cooperating, middle class making money, the interstate highway being built. You follow what I'm trying to say?
Mm-hmm.
What was in it for them was people wanted to be part of that big middle class. They wanted to go to church on Sundays. They didn't want to go to any church that was overtaking the government in the United States. They wanted to, they wanted to go to church and, have a dish to pass supper and sing a couple of hymns and go home. They weren't looking to get into Buddhism or the Eightfold Path. Not in America.
No, not
back then. As I recall it. Now, when the war in Vietnam was on, and we were in Southeast Asia, and some bad things were coming on television, and you were seeing things that you never saw before in your life. What did people want then? What were they telling you? We want peace. Give peace a chance. Love, not war. Right?
Mm-hmm.
It changed. That's what they wanted. That's why people changed. I'm just using political things. And everybody got into, things to do with morality and values and things like that. Now we're at a point where people are saying, we're not talking about the value of something, right or wrong primarily. We're talking about my right to do whatever I want to do.
It's funny you talk about, people wanted to go to church and just, be part of the community, and it's not, you think just about that, at least I do from that spiritual perspective. It's not that way anymore. It's not about, love of God, love of neighbor, love for your family, helping somebody out if they're, having a hard time, It's really changed where, again, by and large, the internet is church for a lot of people, or we have these mega churches that are, just big, auditoriums. And, a lot of these people go where individuals claim to be, prophets and seers, and, they're very much into the political thing. If you don't vote this way, well, God's not going to be pleased, and the end is coming. I was just watching a guy today. He's a pretty popular YouTuber. I'm not going to name names, but he's saying he's having a vision that the next 9/11 is going to happen on January 12th at 12 noon at John F. Kennedy Airport. And how much does it take that these people, whether it's QAnon or somebody on the Sid Roth show or whatever, how many times do we have to see these self-proclaimed prophets fail in what they say before we say, hey, God, common sense, and logic doesn't have anything to do with what these people are doing,
Yeah.
And a lot of people get their information from that kind of thing, and they're biased from that type of thing, So it just goes to show, if I tell you, hey, I'm a prophet, or, I'm a seer, or, I'm somebody that has some kind of special inside information, and I'm telling you to keep trying to walk through a solid brick wall to get through the door, and you've been trying it for, 5 years to get out of the room, something's going to tell you, I don't know what I'm talking about, turn around and look for the exit, but we just keep banging into that wall, and that goes for religion, it goes for politics, people just...
I was telling somebody the other day, if folks who are listening to this show would like to go to a great site, go to a site called Big Think. And it's every great scientist, theologian, really world-class people all over the place. And you'll see the relationship between science, the religions of the world, the philosophies of the world, and how they all come together into the human experience, and how they are all very, very similar. in terms of trying to help people think better in terms and act better in terms of their morality and their view of the world, how they see things realistically and clearly and accurately and with precision. When you're mentioning the Buddhist principles, I'm not a Buddhist, but my entire life I've used the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path as wonderful stuff. I was watching Big Think the other day and listening to the head of the philosophy department from Yale University, and my wife, who was not spiritual at all, I said, "Oh, you're going to hate this," and she said, "Why?" Because he's talking about the value of reading people like Aristotle and Socrates and Plato, which is the basis of all modern philosophy and legal things and so on and so forth. And as he was going over their moral things, I said, "Boy, this sounds like Christianity from Plato's Republic." Not to lose people and everything. It's like identical. And here he is then saying it. I said, wow, I felt like I was a student again. I was in a classroom and I had an epiphany. Because I've been saying this for years by saying, good science is like good Christianity and good Buddhism. And, the good parts of it, it's clear, it's understandable. Love your neighbor as you would love yourself. The Beatitudes and the other things you'll see in Christianity. When you see so many people that are going out, and you were talking about these mega churches or people going in all different directions, it lacks clarity in terms of Christianity.
Oh, absolutely.
It lacks accuracy. It's distortion. Also, there's a wonderful statement. People attributed to, I believe, George Bernard Shaw, who said, the only problem with Christianity, and he was an atheist, he says, nobody's ever tried it. And think of how many people, maybe you're one of them if you're out there, that you talk endlessly about religion and spirituality, but when was the last time you read the New Testament or the Old Testament or understood or studied the Bible in any kind of a way if you're a Christian? I just speak to Christianity, or if you're a Buddhist, or you're into the Tao, when was the last time you read materials and studied that, so that you had some clarity in terms of the meaning of these things, or when you hear people say things in a minister or something, is this accurate? Is it free from errors and distortions? Is it detailed? Is this what you recall reading? Does it relate to your life and your morals, or just to some agenda that somebody has? You can go on and on, for the other things. Is there a logic to it? People think that, religion has no logic to it. That's hogwash. And I shouldn't say religion. Some religions are that term should not be interchangeable with Christianity or Buddhism or whatever. But when you read the New Testament, there's a logic to it. When you read the Old Testament, there's a logic to it.
Well, a lot of the people that say it's illogical, that they have the very warped, one-sided view of Christianity. I was watching a video a couple days ago, and they were saying that it was I think close to 70% of Christians in America, and of course it's spreading to other parts of the world, isn't about living a good life and loving God. It's what God can do for them, the blessings he can give them.
Absolutely.
Because it's very tied up in that, the prosperity gospel,
Yeah.
God will give you cars and money and houses, and so someone who doesn't believe in God sees that and says, oh, the tooth fairy in the sky, the Santa Claus in the sky, the wish granter, your genie in the sky, but that they don't understand that's a very it's Christianity bastardized, by these I don't know what you would call them, prosperity preachers, wolves in sheep's clothing, call them what you will.
Well, it was a way to keep people in the church, and it was a way to, in churches, as I recall, I saw that happening in the 70s big time with Jim Baker with the PTL Club. I saw it with Pat Robertson with the 700 Club. I'm sure that other people did. I had a girlfriend in Georgia who was, her dad was a Pentecostal bishop, and they knew they were evangelicals. I mean, they went around the country. Her mom and dad, what the heck do they call that? It's evangelists.
Mm-hmm.
For their church and everything else. So when I was there, when I was going out with her and stuff like that, my God, she had all the, people would visit her family, all these famous gospel people and everything else. Some of these people were dead serious and spot on. And other people were definitely self-serving and manipulative to kind of build people for money, using religion. And it's really easy to do. Just like you can do it with politics, or you can do it with why would I criticize religion? Psychologists do it all the time. Or diet doctors, or medical companies. It's human nature to build people. To tell them what they want to think, because people are not going to evaluate these things and look for accuracy and precision, precision that we're talking about, and logic and significance and all those kinds of things. They're not going to do that. And the prosperity people, big time. You come here and you go, the old saying, what would Jesus do? Can you imagine if Jesus walked the earth right now? And here you go, we supposedly, let's just use our country. And we have almost $1 trillion military budget. And I understand that we have to have a strong military, that the world that we live in is a dangerous place. But think of all that money. And there's people in homeless cities, and just it goes on with all the social ills. Now, I'm not saying giving everybody a handout. People should, have to work for things or be trained to think that way, to contribute to the world and everything. But think of how we treat other human beings. If we're spiritual people, is it good?
Yeah, no, not very much. Especially in this day and age.
Well, when I lived in Georgia, I remember a guy I used to love, and thank God, I'm going to mention his name. I'm sure he's a long guy. His name was Michael Guido, and he was called the Sower. And he was from Athens, Georgia, and at nighttime, when you'd watch television, his commercials would come on. And he was an Italian guy, actually from Pennsylvania. And he lived in Georgia, and he'd get on, very handsome man with, and he was a musician or something like that. He had a little band, and he would come on there, and he only had like a 1 minute spot, and he would give you little biblical messages. And then I couldn't wait for him to come on every night, because if I could hear him before I go to bed, I just curl up on the bed, and I just believed him, and it was like a message from God. And he'd say, remember, God loves you. He was a little flute musician. He never asked for a dime. And it was Michael Guido, a seed from the sower. Now look at this, all these years later, from the 70s. And here it is, and I still remember him. I can see his face. I met him in a steakhouse. And it was like meeting a rock star for me. And you want to know what? In reality, he was just as good as he was on television. He didn't take a dime from anybody.
There you go.
He was the sower. I'm sure he got something out of it, because if you're a spiritual person, whatever deity or moral or value that you have with that, the more you get into it for the right reasons, you're just rewarded over and over and over again. You're being selfish.
Yeah.
You're just getting goodies.
And those rewards are more, on the inner plane, not, physical things. I mean, sometimes they are, that there can be physical blessings, of sorts, but, God doesn't show his approval of our faith through giving us cars and money, and we need to get beyond all that. But all that being said, we got about 2 minutes to wrap up. So your final message to the audience, seeing the world and reality the way that it is, not the way we want it to be. What would you tell our listening audience after all of this, as far as it?
You have to do. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead. I was going to say about adjusting their, maybe adjusting their perspective and maybe listening to the other side of the conversation.
You have to start by, like, if you're going to be on a diet, and you have to say, this is what's in it for me. What's in it for you is the ability to have a life that is simply better. It's just a better life, to see things accurately, to make better decisions, to see things that you were missing before, to understand yourself and people better, because, like it says in the Bible, one log doesn't burn brightly. We need other people, whether it's to worship God or be in church or, have communion with other people or be around other people and deal with them in a productive manner that makes sense. So what can you do? I mean, the internet, which is a monstrosity, which we should do another show on together, the harm for it, also does a lot of good, has a lot of good information out there. Go on to a good organization like criticalthinking.org or some college that has free course on how to think clearly. Big think. There's other things like that. There are people they're not going to give you one idea. They're going to work on. They have resources here that are fun and understandable on teaching you how to think. It would be like if you go to the gym. In this case, it's a mental gym. And what's in it for you is that you don't take your last breath not knowing what the world was about. I know when I'll take my last breath, I know as a scientist and as somebody who studies perception, how we see things, that any human being isn't seeing 99% of what's on in the universe right around them. We're not. And that's a whole other show.
Yeah, definitely not.
And if you get a chance just to see a little more, you'll find out if you're having questions of faith or things like that, you become a clearer thinker. I can guarantee you that you're not going to lose your faith in God or your spiritual feelings. They're only going to improve. If you want a better understanding of human beings, their strengths and their weaknesses, see human beings for what they are. They're not all good and they're not all bad. They're human beings. And learn how to understand what you're seeing. Because a lot of what we see is very scary. And that's how we get involved in these traps of not practicing our morals and values and religions and science and all that other kind of stuff. Do a little work. Take a little time and do something like, it would be like a diet or go into the gym. Just a little bit. And a little bit done every day or a little bit done several times a week. In a few months, you'll be a different person. Seeing the world the way it is, not the way you want it to be. And learning what the components are, what the skills are for that. Because like anything else, it's a skill set.
And I would add to that, looking at as a mental diet, stay away from the junk food, all of the fear and the overly political slanted self-proclaimed seers and all that on the internet. Stay away from that stuff. Love your neighbor as yourself. And I've said it many times when I had the spirit side, and I'll say it again, stop looking for leaders. Stop looking for people to tell you what the truth is, and seek to find what it is yourself, because what you're being told might not be reality. And high percentage of the time in the day and age we live in, it's not. A lot of false information out there from both sides of the fence, and very, very dangerous stuff.
Do you remember when the Pharisees tried to trick Jesus and asked him which commandment was the greatest?
Mm-hmm.
They wanted to get him for heresy. and everything else. And it ties into what you're saying. And forgive me for being like a preacher here, but you can't live on science alone. I think like that. It's a very funny thing. I have a little thing called the Red Book, and it has all the commands of Jesus in the New Testament. I think there's only 46 or 49. I always make the mistake between 46 or 49. That's all. That's all that he ever said in there. But when the Pharisees or the Sadducees, whoever, were trying to trick him and get him in big trouble, and they said, which one is the greatest? He was told the truth with clarity and accuracy and precision and relevance and depth and logic and significance and fairness. And he said, you love God with all your heart. That's number one. And number two is love your neighbor. All the other commandments follow these two.
Yep.
And that's what people need to do with whatever they're looking at. They need to get some clarity and accuracy. Look and see what was really said, and you'll be amazed.
They certainly will. But with that being said, we have to wrap up this fine episode this week. Stan, it was good to have you here. Thanks for having this conversation with us this week.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Just think, if I was still teaching, they would burn me in effigy. No, you can check me out. You're a rabbi professor. I always love teaching, and the students are wonderful to me, and the college is just wonderful. I could always be myself, So I enjoyed it immensely.
And there you go. And I can vouch for him. Stan doesn't think I listen sometimes, but when he speaks, I listen, and I take it to great consideration, because he's one of the voices I know in this crazy world that most of the time makes a lot of sense.
Probably about 2%.
Well, maybe
I get lost in the weeds like anybody else.
Yeah, Well, we'll leave it at that and cease with our bad jokes at the end. But anyway, folks, thanks for listening. We appreciate it. We hope you got something out of this show this week. Until next time, stay safe, stay well, stay in love, and live a balanced life. And I'll see you next time here on Zen Spirit.
And eat your broccoli.
Yes, eat your broccoli.